Hello, and welcome to today's ACM Learning webinar. This webcast is part of ACM's commitment to lifelong learning and serving the over 97,000 computing professionals and students who are ACM's members. I'm Jan Timanowski, ACM Education and Professional Development Manager. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with ACM or what it has to offer, here is more information. ACM offers educational and professional development resources that bolster skill sets and enhance career opportunities. Our members can stay competitive in the constantly changing world of computing with a range of ACM Learning Center resources at learning.acm.org. You can see a few of the highlights on your screen. ACM recognizes the role of computing in driving the innovation that sustains competitiveness in a global environment. ACM provides timely computing information published by ACM, including communications of the ACM and Q magazine, access to the ACM Digital Library, the world's most comprehensive database of computing literature, international conferences that draw leading experts on a broad spectrum of computing topics, and support for education and research, including curriculum development, teacher training, and the ACM Turing and ACM Prize in Computing Awards. ACM enables its members to solve critical problems using new technology that enriches our lives and advances our society in the digital age. Before we get started, I'd like to quickly mention a few housekeeping items shown on the slide in front of you. First, the slides will advance automatically throughout the event. On the bottom panel, you'll find a number of additional widgets and resources. If you are experiencing problems with the slides or audio, press the F5 key in Windows, Command R if you're on a Mac, or refresh your browser on a mobile device. Or you can close and relaunch the presentation. To control volume, adjust the master volume on your computer. If you have questions during this webinar, please type them into the Q&A box at any time during the webinar and click the Submit button. I'll organize the questions as Toufi speaks, and he'll reserve time at the end of the presentation to address them. This session is being recorded and will be archived. You will receive an automatic email notification when it becomes available. And check learning.acm.org or webinar.acm.org for updates on this and other upcoming webcasts. At the end of the presentation, you'll see a survey open on your screen. Please take a minute to fill it out to help us improve our webinars. You may also open the link to the survey at any time from the Resources widget on your screen. You can also use the Facebook and Twitter widgets in the bottom panel to share the presentation link with your friends, as well as tweet comments and questions using the hashtag ACMLearning. We'll be watching for your tweets. We also have a new community discourse page to continue the discussion after this webcast, including questions we won't be able to get through during the Q&A session. Today's presentation is Blockchain a Branch of AI by Toufi Saliba. Toufi Saliba is CEO of Toda Algorand, Privacy Shell, and chair of the ACM Practitioners Board Conference Committee. Toufi's background is mainly in crypto, machine learning, decentralized governance, and distributed computing. He has authored and co-authored several algorithms, protocols, and patents. Toufi's companies have had several exits for software that he built from ground up. He sits on multiple Silicon Valley startup boards and advisory for several F500 companies. Currently, Toufi runs a startup factory and InfoSec advisory called Privacy Shell, with the main focus on Layer 0 blockchain protocol called Toda. With offices in San Francisco, Palo Alto, Seoul, Korea, and Toronto. You can find more info on Toufi's background in the bio widget on your screen. Toufi, without further ado, take it away.
Thanks, Jan. It's a pleasure to be here, and looking forward to talk about this. And before I dive into the what we call AI decentralized, I think it's important to mention what is AI decentralized. It's basically an initiative to bring together AI practitioners with blockchainers. The intent here, unlike many others, they're trying to bring in AI to blockchain. Here, the intent is to bring some of the science that is learned in the blockchain to AI, and mainly for security. And when we talk about security, one of the elements is called autonomous decentralized governance, and that's mainly something that is super important to be introduced to anything that is autonomous AI. Sometimes folks might not be working on autonomous AI, but at some point we feel that everything that is AI, if it makes it, it would be connected to one organism that we're building, all of us, Homo sapien. And it's important to look at the governance very seriously. What we mean by that and why is it classified as security? It's basically an attack from within. So we can get into the topic here, and it's basically AIDecentralized.com is where all of those events, we're hoping that we can have them in 25 cities. We're currently 11 out of the 25 have identified deputy chairs. And we have a huge event happening in Toronto on May 22nd, which follows the AI for Good Summit that happens in Geneva, May 15th, 16th, and 17th. It's probably the largest gathering of the biggest AI minds in the world. Yeah, and we have workshop in Busan, Korea on the 26th of April, and so on and so forth. People can find out on AI Decentralized. So I'm not here to advertise that. I'm here to explain what is AI Decentralized and get into the topic of is blockchain a branch of AI or is AI a branch of blockchain? And it's so we're extremely subjective in defining intelligence, let alone artificial intelligence. However, there's a general consensus around the definition of intelligence. According to Alex Wisner, intelligence is a force, F, that acts so as to maximize future freedom of action. To most people, AI is basically robots walking around looking like humans. For most AI scientists, the subjectivity still carries a huge weight in defining AI. In most cases, AI is still compared to human intelligence. However, what if we don't recognize AI when we see it? So I'm going to go through some of the slides here. And one question we need to address is blockchain a branch of AI? We talk a little bit about what's the mission of AI Decentralized. We can dive in deeper into this. And does security matter in autonomous AI? And we go through details in each and every one of those. So one of the things here, the multi-agent system, which I'm sure many folks in the AI industry, they know what multi-agent system is, and it is one of the branches of AI. It has evolved rapidly into many different forms. But most impressively, one of its forms is autonomous. It pays for itself. It lives independently. And the first successful implementation has been living on this planet for over 9 years now. Not only does it earn its living, it also incentivizes people to work for it. For the very first time, we have an unstoppable autonomous living organism built by us, not owned by us, but owned by itself. It currently consumes billions of dollars per year. We can talk about that efficiency as well, and how we can get it to be efficient. And what I've just described, and in many conferences that I attend, and I speak in a lot of the conferences, and most recent one was the WIC, World Internet Conference, and try to get a show of hands. And that description seems to resonate with folks that is AI. But when you give it the name, it's called Bitcoin. People are like, no, this is not AI. So in any case, it's let's call it artificial life to save certain folks from thinking that this is not AI or it is AI. But if we look back into history and we see the evolution of AI, many times when we get there, we keep pushing that bar further and further, and we can pretty much foresee that in autonomous cars. Like right now, it's all AI, and at some point, autonomous cars are driving around for a long time, people are like, oh, that's not AI. The definition keeps changing, but if we were to say blockchain is a branch of AI or not, let's not get stuck over this. The point here is that the longest standing autonomous vehicle that's built by human yet is not owned by a human, it's called Bitcoin. And the evolution of that, we've seen 1,400 ledger-based blockchains that they kind of inherited from that, and then some other evolution of the blockchain that they're ledgerless. I'm co-author of one. It's more like the next evolution of TCP/IP, which we can also discuss that as well. Cool. So is this AI? I'm pretty sure the audience here at ACM, we kind of know a little bit better to know that this is not how we're expecting at least the future to look like. Science fiction can be very entertaining, but if you have robots and they have you're looking at a screen and they have like the whole earpiece and whatnot, it's a bit dumb in so many different perspectives. And in any case, to most people, they kind of feel that this is how the robots would look like in the future. And it's, again, very, very subjective. Robots, they don't necessarily have to look at like human. Like we said earlier, if it owns itself, defends itself, has a useful job, provides a service, can't turn it off. Many people in AI, they feel like when we talk about certain threat of AI, and I'm not here to discuss about the threat of AI actually, which is going to be surprising to many, but think that security is like we're thinking of, oh, AI is going to eradicate us or whatnot. They would feel like, oh, well, if it bothers you, you can just like turn it off, turn off the, this is not how it's going to look like. We're already starting to see certain versions of it, and you literally cannot turn it off. Even very primitive versions, and even the Chinese government cannot turn it off. Not a single power on the planet, not all, many, even if you combine all nations on the planet, they just cannot turn it off. Yet it can be replicated. There's a lot of forks of Bitcoin. You can like take it and make a copy. Some people, they say, oh, well, this is not the original, and so on and so forth. It's something that Yuval Noah Harari talks about, and it's basically money is a product of our common imagination, and that happens to be Bitcoin, but it's if it's doing different purpose, blockchain can do a lot of other things, not only about money. Anything of value that you need to transmit, it could be, a vehicle, something, that from the atom world versus the digital world, and anything of value can be exchanged without having to rely on a third party. And that's the essence of this technology. That's at least the service that it provides. So when it's replicated, sometimes the replica may not necessarily carry with it that value that folks built from the beginning with the first part. And the other thing, it continues to evolve without its original creator, and that's extremely, extremely important. If the creator has to be there throughout, may not necessarily be as intelligent as we hope to be. So, and at the end, no one controls it. It's autonomous. Many people, they have misconception about the whole blockchain, and they want it to be centralized, or want private blockchain. That's better off build the database. Okay, Bitcoin blockchain, no one controls it. It is autonomous. It runs by itself. It's not a company called Bitcoin. It was created by human, but it's currently no one controls it. No one owns it. Cool. So Eliezer Yudkowsky said that the AI does not hate you, nor does it love you, but you are made out of atoms, which it can use for something else. I think here we may need to look at other things before atoms. I mean, there are a lot of atoms in this universe. I think it's like 2 to the power 160. So I'm pretty sure it's not going to first go to the Homo sapien atoms. But if you look at energy, so maybe we will have this problem one day sooner than most think, if sharing resources, and if energy can be utilized by certain AI that is autonomous, whatnot, and maybe taken away from folks. So before atoms, I would say it's perhaps energy, but again, we can get to the details of that. So the topic here and the security that we need to ensure, we may not know if AI will destroy us. That can be at some point in the future. But what we do know historically about Homo sapiens, when power is in the hands of few, throughout the entire history, when we look at power and you provide it kind of get that beast out of us. We all have it, but then we learn to live better in society and so on and so forth. But having something that it's super powerful, which I'm going to use an example that we're all familiar with next, electronic money. Okay, so with electronic money, it's same as AI is, it's created as a service, as an additional thing that can facilitate people's life. But it's very, very powerful. And with that power, it was used as a method of control. Yet it wasn't built to be a method of control. It was built to be something as of, additional service for people. And that method of control uses always, anything that is controlled, it has certain excuse to be like, okay, we're doing AML, anti-money laundering, and then, or anti-terrorist financing and so on and so forth. But when you look at those kind of things, it's just always like excuses the same way. Privacy gets invaded for additional security or whatnot. Perhaps those things could have been done better, and they will be done better. And this is some of the promises blockchain is trying to solve here. But it's not too late to solve it for electronic money. My fear and the fear of many other people in the industry, that they're very well versed with autonomous decentralized governance. It takes a lot to build an autonomous decentralized governance. It is not easy. It's not trivial. If it's not by design of anything that is AI, it might be very, very hard to do it later on. Do we have a solution? No, we do not. And if we did have a solution, we'd be proposing a solution instead of bringing together some of the top minds in AI and the top minds in crypto, and hopefully raising that awareness around the governance. So if AI is extremely powerful and much more powerful than electronic money, and it can be used as a method of control in some areas in the world, if that source of control is trusted by the people, that's great. If it's worthy of that trust, that's fantastic. But sometimes it's not the case. Over 70% of the world, they don't trust their own government. So if you think building AI and you have that control of AI centralized in a certain place, and even if it is autonomous, but there's still centralized control into pushing the code and updates and so on and so forth, the attack can be sometimes from within, let alone the attack that it can be going into that central place to bring down the entire system or get it to behave maliciously. So the example that I'm using here, the electronic money system that exists in the world today, first, the cost as opposed to just fees. Like, when you use the American Express, it pays you 2% cash back. That's not the cost. Okay, so that's like a fees that it's minus. Other credit cards, the fees are zero. Existing blockchains, they don't actually show the cost. Be like, oh, hey, I can send you $10 of Bitcoin, but there has been an exploitation on Bitcoin 5 years and 4 months ago, and the cost, if we were to calculate what the cost is, and we take, let's say, a nation in emerging market, so let's say Madagascar, 25 million people, they have like 10 million devices. If they're using electronic money system, they call it the cashless or whatnot, as if it's supposed to be service to those regions. Every time there's a transaction, there's a leakage of wealth out of that nation. One person used to give $2 to their neighbor to get a cup of coffee. You take the $2, give the neighbor, you get a cup of coffee. The $2 now with the neighbor. With the electronic money system, it might appear to be that way. You look at your device and it's like, okay, I have received the $2, can give you the cup of coffee. But then when you ask the question, how come there are 9 other people getting paid outside of this nation? The person's running the database, the administrators in some other country, the insurance company somewhere else, and the manufacturers of, some miners or whatnot. So when we say miners here, just for the benefit of a lot of the folks listening in, many of you would know what miners is in the blockchain space, but those that they don't, miners, they're machines that they're running, and supposedly they're there to validate the transactions and whatnot, but they run many methods that they're orthogonal to the security of the system, and those that can be enhanced. And the exploitation that happened on Bitcoin about 5 years and 4 months ago, it's basically involved certain aspects of the machine that were not anticipated initially, that part would evolve on its own while the other parts, they don't. And you get to the point where Bitcoin today consumes more electricity than 150 nations, and same as all the others they inherit from that. So the next evolution of that is we're not expecting to be a wasteful energy. There's no free lunch. I mean, there's certain proof of work that needs to be done, but at least the work itself can be distributed computing, which we can talk about that as well. So the other issue here, I talked about governance, I talked about cost. Decentralized exchanges is also another problem with current electronic money system. If it's PayPal or Alipay or whoever is providing a certain payment in a region, as much as they wish for that to be fungible across the globe, it's good for them, good for whatever currency that you're using. Sometimes it's not, but in general it is good if you're going to look at the grand scheme of things. You still have to, if you use that other system, if I'm on PayPal and I need to pay, you have to be on PayPal, and if Alipay, you have to be on Alipay. The technology is there to enable payment, that they don't have to depend on centralized exchanges. They can have autonomous decentralized governance, and they can have a cost run by the people. Okay, so we're talking about this, and that's evolving in the electronic money system. We need to start doing things for AI now and not wait until it's too late. I might be wrong. Maybe it's not too late. Maybe after you push in the entire AI with certain centralized governance, you might be able to put on decentralized governance later on and try to fix it. But if I'm right, and if it's too late, the fear that we have at that point that we'll be facing, what we're leaving for the next generation, is not that AI is going to replace us and attack us and hate us, whatnot. It's the centralized governance that could be used to attack from within. AI can liberate us or can enslave us. I don't think it's going to be anywhere in the middle. Those that share that opinion seem to be diving in heavily to try to solve this early on. And hopefully together we can work on leaving something to the next generation that is a lot secure. So when we talk about blockchain, it's good to talk about some of the exploitation that happen, which leave many of the intelligent people in the industry that didn't really get into the blockchain. And if you take any smart, database person, will be like, why would I use this if I have like a certain point of attack or whatnot? Insecurity, you're as good as your weakest link. It's just a saying. In autonomous decentralized governance, it's just a security model. So if you have one point that is centralized, if you have somebody who's going to pitch you on like 499 decentralized aspects of how it's actually run, but there's only one out of the 500 that is centralized, you're as good as your weakest link. Okay, so might as well run a database and you can get the whole thing running much more efficiently. Okay, so with Bitcoin, the exploitation that happened about 4 months ago started evolving the hashing capability of computers. So you end up with one machine that has hashing power as much as the entire nation regular computers. Okay, so what was meant to be initially available for everybody to participate in that economy is now for just a few that they buy those machines and put them in data centers and so on and so forth. So please, when you do look at blockchains in isolation, it's important to look at what was intended and where it's actually going, but not necessarily where it's at today in a lot of wasteful energy. And what we mean by wasteful energy here, it's not a little amount of energy, it's a lot of energy. This here, it shows the Bitcoin's current estimated annual electricity consumption in terawatts. When you compare that to other countries, it's a bit more than Algeria. Okay, that's not good. Number of U.S. households powered by for 1 day electricity consumed for a single transaction is 29. Okay, that's horrible. So this is cost. This is taking some of the resources that we have and converting it. Electricity is some of the resources we have that is can be converted to mechanical energy and so on and so forth. It's been actually converted after this process to thermal energy, which is universally the least attractive source of type of energy. So you can't get that back. And to run about 5 or 6 transactions per second. That's it. Okay. So like I said before, there is no free lunch, which means that if we are going to get to have this kind of burn, perhaps we need to have about 120,000 transactions per second. And we are getting there with different things that they're happening. And there will be few forks in the future that are driven by the users, for the users, and so on and so forth. Will be perhaps fork from the miners once and for all. And hopefully we can have an economy where the smallest unit in Bitcoin, if it's equal to $1, it can sustain itself and can work. And sure, it can be open to 1,000 other or more currencies, but at least it won't be consuming a lot of energy for very little work. With that, setting the bar so low, so when you look at other blockchains, when the bar is so low, they just have to do a little bit better. And they're like, oh, hey, I've got some scalability and whatnot. We really need to look at the core of the things. What was it built for? It was built to reduce friction and get, even if it doesn't have scalability, it doesn't have any inclusion, so global inclusion. So we really need to address those, and there are a lot of methods to address those. So we feel that if we want to learn from this technology to start building autonomous decentralized governance for AI, we need to look at some of the issues here. And we look at this chart of how it's heading to more and more terawatt hours per year for Bitcoin. This is the last 6 months. You can see it's like triple. Okay, so that's not good. The other thing is that with the effort that a lot of the folks in the community are working on, we used to say get rid of miners, and we get that crazy look. Nowadays, a lot of people, they don't like necessarily the miners, and those that are actually miners are trying to move away from being miners and having to depend on a lot of electricity to find a better way I mean, we're all Homo sapien, we're driven by greed, so we understand, okay, they want to make money or whatnot, but when they hit the wall with that and they feel that they are dependent on certain centralized companies that they build those machines, that they want to kind of fork off that as well. So there's a lot of drive that eventually we will see a solution that can help everyone. And if folks, they can find a way that they can even themselves make more money, that's a driver for them. So then they will do that more easily than if they're going to lose. Cool. So why we need to do this, and if we were to learn from the blockchain to build, for anything that is autonomous AI, it's important to look at some of the promises of the blockchain, and they're too good to pass on. We've seen some in medical, healthcare, of how you can port you can own your entire healthcare record and port across nations and whatnot. And it's around the user basically, and how it can be used for law enforcement, wills and inheritance, insurance, real estate, land registry, a huge land registry that we're noticing as well, along with a lot of the transportation, and AML and ATF and all of the stuff, and anti-terrorist financing. So ATF stands for, AML is anti-money laundering. So all of those promises, they won't necessarily make it to life. They actually, most of them, they won't, if we don't solve the core foundation of reducing the cost. If the cost is going to be higher than you did it before, it's not going to happen. And currently, with all the existing blockchain hype and whatnot, the cost is higher. And again, that's mainly due to that exploitation. But there's a lot of solutions. Sometimes it's a layer 2 solution, something like the Lightning Network or whatnot. They're fabulous layer 2 that they kind of take it off chain. But there's a lot of other solutions that can go on layer 0. And with layer 0, it's something that I've mentioned earlier that I will talk a little bit about that. I am co-author of a protocol that is a layer 0. There's no money per se in the protocol thing. It's open, free for everyone to use when it's out there. But it's like a next evolution of TCP/IP. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're replacing TCP/IP. You can have TCP/IP running for certain things, the same way you have, when HTTP came along, you still use SMTP for certain things. So SMTP is still being used for email, and you have HTTP doing fabulous work for the World Wide Web. The next evolution of TCP/IP is because it actually goes on a network packet and gives it a unique number the same way IPv4, IPv6 gives a unique number for machines. And with that, along with a lot of steps, you're able to have autonomous decentralized governance around all of the machines equally, same class. There is no distinction between certain things that they're called miners and others are called users, whatnot. It's all same class of machines. And with that, if you think of like building autonomous AI, for example, for cars or whatnot, you can learn a lot from that to strengthen that security around the governance of autonomous, decentralized governance of the system. So what do we mean by that, and how envision it might be like too foggy, whatever. It's actually, when you have a system that it's autonomous and it's running all on its own, you don't know what it's going to do next, if it's going to do A versus B or whatnot. And it doesn't know either. It's just actually calculating very rapidly and doing all of those algorithms in its electronic head or whatnot. Having an autonomous decentralized governance, it would have machine not against, but controlling another machine, another machine, another machine. So all of the machines, they kind of maintain a certain things that needs to be what you call the actual proof of work in order to continue doing what it's supposed to be doing and be eligible to perform certain tasks. So if you have built a system to do a specific thing, it will continue doing that specific thing. And again, it is not trivial. It requires a lot of work and it needs to be done by design from the ground up. Me saying that, it doesn't necessarily going to change a lot of the folks that have spent a lot of money and effort into building autonomous AI for certain things. It's just going to proceed because the economy, they've spent the money, they're looking for return on investment, they're just going to proceed with that. But for folks that they haven't, it would be important to start looking into that very seriously, at least for the sake of next generations. Those kind of things that can be very exploited, and the circumstances may not necessarily be in our favor. And that's long before like AI is going to replace the entire humanity. So I'm not really talking about that. I'm talking about while we're getting there, the actual governance of AI is the security that needs to be addressed. And I see that there's going to be a lot of questions here, so I'll try to rush through the next few slides to make sure that we leave some room for questions. So, you know, AI, vs. AI, and sci-fi movies, they like to personalize it, make it look a little more like human. We've kind of envisioned that it's sometimes towards combination of getting a source transcendence or whatnot, but it might just be like Bitcoin form, and or may not. But in any case, let me see how what questions we have here. I'm going to go to the last slide. Yeah, so thank you. And Jan, we have about 20 minutes here for questions, so do you want to take it?
Yes, thanks so much, Toufi. We have tons of questions. So a couple that came in earlier. There was a question, if you can turn it off, then why isn't the internet artificial intelligence or the telephone network?
Well, not turning it off on its own doesn't make it AI. It's one of the other elements. It's an and all the other things combined. So I did not intend to say that just like one in isolation can make it AI. I feel that if we were to go back to that slide, I think. Yeah, so it's you can't turn it off, you can't stop it, but it can be replicated, has useful job, defends itself, owns itself, continues to evolve, no one controls it, and the idea is that like that's, we're calling this artificial life. There's an additional component that we're trying to make it a branch of AI. So can't turn it off on its own, definitely. That will not classify it as AI. I mean, you can have a fan that you can turn off, and the fan keeps turning. And so I hope that answers the question. Next.
Great. Another question is, autonomy is necessary but not sufficient for artificial intelligence. We still need the intelligence part, no?
Yeah. So that bar that we keep moving every time we're getting into the defining of AI is what I kind of alluded to earlier, and that's a very good question. It's actually if we were to just look at all of the elements combined of like, it actually has a useful job. It's providing a service, okay, and it's providing a service that could replace millions and millions of bankers across the globe. Okay, it's replacing an actual, work that is mundane. And from that perspective, if you were to just say, how can we replace that? And then people start building, well, if it's going to replace that, it needs to be very intelligent because that's a human doing that. A monkey cannot do that. We need to build that thing to be intelligent. So that if you figure out a way to actually replace that without necessarily making it look super intelligent, why is that not a branch of AI along with all the other elements again? So that alone perhaps cannot cut it by putting it along with all the other elements, such as defends itself, owns itself, and it gives an incentive to a lot of people to help it evolve, and all that can classify it as AI.
Thanks, Toufi. Another question regarding autonomy. Smart contracts, as they are now implemented in Ethereum, are not autonomous. They can only react to calls and transactions that have come from the outside. Do you know of any projects where agents can be proactive in a decentralized ledger?
Yeah, so the Ethereum smart contract, I mean, you could build a smart contract on Ethereum and get it to be autonomous. It is, I mean, it's a Turing complete. You can build all kind of stuff on top of Ethereum. It's just the actual fees that will end up hitting the owner is not necessarily liked every time that smart contract is running. Transaction or whatnot, it's costing something that they refer to as gas, and gas is more like the currency of that currency. That so it doesn't use Ethereum inside that system. But the smart contract, by definition, is not necessarily that it's like super smart. Like it's we need to just make sure that for the rest of the audience, I know that whoever asked the question likely knows that it's more, when we say smart contract, it's more like a machine acting, kind of like the vending machine, which is the creator of smart contract, Nick Szabo, 1991, or the inventor of smart contract, made that reference to the vending machine. When you put on a dollar, it gives you the juice. You put on 75 cents, it gives you water. It doesn't matter what's your color, how you feel, how it feels, and so forth. It's always like doing exactly as the input and output can come out of that. But if you want to have that autonomous, you can have one machine sitting next to the other machine, and this one puts on a dollar there, and this one gives a juice, and then vice versa. I mean, they keep doing that to each other. So you can have an autonomous thing. It's currently the fees are high and the costs are prohibitive. Many people, they complain about the fees, but yet if you were to drill down and look at the cost is about 100 times the fees. Or what most people don't see that is because there's a lot of people coming into the system like Ethereum. So the more new people they come into from outside, new people or new money coming in, it keeps buying into that currency, and the currency keeps going up. But if you were to look in isolation, I can give the example of Madagascar, that is going to leak out, okay? Every 15 seconds, there's 2.5 ETH that they're being paid for miners. So that dilutes all the community in that system, and that cost is prohibitive. Now, the price of Ethereum dropped over the last 6 weeks, 3 times what it was before. Which means that costs a drop because the cost is still, it's actually 5 ETH in every 15 seconds. So it's about basically $5,000 every 15 seconds. It's a lot of money. Okay. So yeah, it's important to take those in consideration, and why many of building those smart contracts are not necessarily autonomous. But when we're talking about bringing that decentralized the autonomous decentralized governance into AI, we're not talking about like the smart contract. We're talking about by design, what you're building, having those machines looking after each other from the perspective of making sure that you as a machine, you're supposed to do this job and only this job in order to continue to perform, continue to have access to resources and so on and so forth. In the other machine, they're making sure that that's what's happening. Human cannot compete with machines. The machines are much better at certain things. Okay, next.
Great. A question that came in earlier, sort of more foundational. Mr. Saliba, could you please compare traditional AI and decentralized AI? What are the major differences?
So we're trying to actually get to decentralized AI. We haven't seen, much. We're trying to actually get folks to see that the blockchain is kind of like a branch of AI or whatnot. So then we can have a little bit more cohesive relationship between the two practitioners. But I would want people to get stuck on that. If you don't want to call it AI, you can call it blockchain. It has already a name, so that's fine. The idea here is that we need to get folks together to figure out solutions early on and have AI built by design to be to have those security measures in place. Yeah, so that's basically most of the AI that is out there. That we know of, at least, they're centralized AI, and with so much power that is coming out of that, we need to be very careful with it.
Great. Here's an interesting question. Do you think it would be possible for autonomous decentralized governance as a function of a system to evolve into an autonomous decentralized government? Say, for instance, for a municipality, if not for a nation, might this facilitate trust in government? Absolutely. No, it's a very, very good question. So it's so yeah, that's another thing. It's like, if you look at, is the government smart? Well, is the government intelligent? If we were to replace the government, do we need artificial intelligence? Well, for now, we might call it artificial intelligence, and when we look at the solution, be like, oh, this is so trivial, this is not artificial intelligence. Well, yeah, the blockchain can actually replace the government pretty much. 99% of the functions that they exist in the government today can be replaced by the blockchain. I do a lot of seminars with regulators, trying to educate them on the blockchain stuff, because they're trying to see, it's like, oh, there's a lot of scams out there, whatnot. We need to figure out how to protect the people. And towards the end of the seminar, they do ask me often that question, that, so AI is going to replace a lot of people's jobs. What do you think blockchain, what jobs is going to replace first? And I kind of look at them and smile and say, first will be regulators. So a lot of them, they smile back, and because they don't want to pass on that mundane job to the next generations anyways. So if it can be automated, we want to automate it, and if we figure out a way to use the blockchain to do it, we will. There will be a lot of AI components that they can get in, that they're external, and we refer to them in the blockchain world as oracles. That they're, the more intelligent the oracle, the more it can be reliable. AI is very probabilistic, while crypto is very deterministic. And I use the word "very" here very carefully, because it's when we say deterministic, it's as deterministic as it can get. It's like 0.00001, or actually 99.99999. So yeah, that's basically how I can see some of those things that can help each other out. And when it comes to governments, a lot of current governments, they're much more geared towards servicing the people. They're looking at it very seriously, and how it can replace a lot of the functions. Because at the end of the day, if you're able to automate a government, it's better service for the people. You're able to reduce the taxes, and you're able to continue providing more and more services. So
The governments, they take taxes. Sometimes they print money out of thin air or whatnot because they need to pay for people in that government, whether there's corruption or not, they still need to pay the people. But if those people, they're being replaced by the machine to service the rest of the people, it's a great thing that we're leaving for next generation. So current government folks, they might feel it's like, hey, this is an existential threat, but that's not how it will be perceived. They're still going to have a job for the next while. It's just the next generation would benefit from that, and they would be proud if they participated in that, because we're here about the people and not being friction.
Wow, very interesting, Toufi. Lots of social implication questions that we're getting. There's actually one about take another question about what are the performance metrics for this technology, apart from speed and power, which can be tested, comparable to reliability, sensitivity, specificity for AI and ML, and so on?
Mm-hmm. So from that perspective, it's been like the most reliable technology in the open. Gets attacked every single day, and it still has immutability, irrefutability. Can't have censorship in databases. You cannot have it on Bitcoin or that evolution. That it's from that perspective, it's very super solid. If you were to look at the throughput, I think the question probably trying to get to what the throughput is. That's very low in existing blockchains. That's what I was actually referring to from scalability perspective. So the block time in Bitcoin is 10 minutes, in Ethereum is 15 seconds, but still the throughput is very comparable. Bitcoin, you do 7 transactions per second, max, and maybe a little bit more now. Depends on which fork. And with Ethereum, you can do 15. So the bar is super, super low. They talk about like the next solution, we're trying to scale it up to 100, 200, 300. I mean, we should be looking into millions to service humanity. This is, so there will be a lot of evolution from the ground up that can actually get it there. So if you were to look at how we're going to introduce those kind of things to AI, it would be nice for AI folks to start looking at the most advanced versions of things and not be stuck on. Currently, there's a common understanding between all of the blockchainers. It's like, if you were to run something on chain, it's just going to cost more. That's how it is. But that's not true. It doesn't have to be the case. It's intended to reduce the cost, and by reducing, we're not talking about 20% reduction, we're talking about 99.99%. And if it's not going to be that much, it's not going to be as disruptive. So eventually we are getting there. So in my day job with the Torah, we have a lot of AI companies that they try to build things on existing blockchain. They're hitting the wall with things. And again, I want to really get into so much details on that. I don't like to advertise any of the work that I do, but they do come in and try to have that to scale very, very efficiently. Because with AI, you need a lot of transactions. And if you're trying to have decentralized governance around certain aspects of it, you need it to run very efficiently.
Great, thanks, Toufi. We got a bunch of questions about the energy consumption, of course, of cryptocurrencies. One is the energy consumption of Bitcoin needed for its reproduction, aka mining, is hardly sustainable in the long run. How will Bitcoin escape its own demise, which seems to approach faster than that of our own species? Was that a design feature or a magnified flaw our own species seems to have too? Big question.
Very, very good question. Yeah, that's basically what and I'm glad I kind of spent a few slides on this, and it's the exploitation that happened on Bitcoin. I go back to this slide here. It started about 5 years and 4 or 5 months ago, and it's basically started evolving certain aspects of the machine without evolving the rest of it. The initial design was expected to be available for everyone. Sure, I mean, if you want to call it like a flaw in the design because it was able to be exploited, take that. But I think there's a lot of things that are being done to fix it from the ground up. Like I said earlier, I am familiar with a lot of layer 2 technologies that can solve it from that perspective, but I'm also co-author of a layer 0 technology that can solve it from the ground up. The goal here is if we don't have something that it's very efficient and scalable, it's not going to cut it. So that question is spot on. It's not going to be existent in the future if we continue the evolution around that exploitation. It's not meant to be like that. I know a couple of guys that I'm not in the liberty to discuss who they are or whatnot, but they're currently testing Bitcoin on top of Toda. And with that, what they're intending on doing is truly they're believers in every Satoshi can be worth $1 one day, which means every Bitcoin can be worth $100 million. And if they can put it on top of Toda, they're able to have forecasts at least that can have a sustainable economy that can actually function. So it's good for all of the evolution that is coming over the next while, and not just focus on that exploitation and judge it based on that. And it's by design. If you look at the existing, every single blockchain, they call it distributed ledger technology. It's actually replicated. There isn't a single one of them that is actually distributed ledger technology that is out there. It's replicated ledger technology, so it makes people more confused about it. That replication in Bitcoin case like 58,000 times. You don't really need this much times if I were to be sending transactions to be replicated. So by design, it's inefficient. But at the time, that maintains, in the banking ledger and registry for cars and whatnot, they have a ledger. So it's trying to take that model and make it decentralized. So it's a starting point, and that's why we're fine by saying that it is a primitive form of AI, or maybe you don't want to call it AI or whatnot, but it is at least it's a primitive form of autonomous being or artificial life that is evolving. It's capable of making it across the cliff.
Thanks, Toufi. So I think we have time for maybe one more question. As with anything concerning AI these days, of course.
So Jan, we have 2 more minutes. Is there any other question that you want to? I know that, by the way, guys, there are a lot of unanswered questions. What we will do, we will go through each and every one of them and provide answers on the site and on the link. So I apologize that 20 minutes is not enough to answer about a couple hundred questions here. We have, I think we had over maybe 3,000 people that registered to this event, so there's a lot of questions. But Jan, is there any last question that you've picked here that you want to address before we wrap off?
Yeah, maybe just a quick question. It's a big question. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time for it today, but Jan? Technological.
Maybe Jan is on mute. Well, if that's the case, I can. I'm happy to answer any questions. I can go to the slide of my email if anybody wants to contact me anytime. I'm super excited about this mission, and I really think that we can work together towards leaving a better future for next generation. I could be wrong in some aspects, but I'm sure most of you would agree that the mission to add additional security into AI is the least that we would end up resulting in, and hopefully we can work together to build a system that it's sustainable, that it's safe, and that it's better for the future of humanity. Jan, if you're back, we still have 1 minute. Do you want to take the next?
Hey, Toufi. Apologies.
Okay. So we can't hear Jan.
Yep.
In that case, I'll wrap it off myself. So questions, comments about this webcast, learning@acm.org, ACM discourse page. If you guys can take a screenshot of this, that would be great. You can take a screenshot of the previous one as well. And if any of you would attend the AI Decentralized events in person, please come by and say hello. I myself will be in all 25 cities. I fly a lot. People ask me, where do you live? And I say on an airplane. So I get invited to speak in a lot of events as well. If you ever in one of those events, please come by and say hello. It would be a pleasure to meet you all in person. And thank you for attending. I think this is it. We're at the hour. So thank you.